Have you ever wondered how successful architecture, engineering, and construction companies scale their business?
Or have you ever wanted guidance on how to get more growth, wealth, and freedom from your AEC company?
Well, then you're in luck. Hi, I'm Will Forat.
And I'm Justin Nagel, and we're your podcast hosts.
We interview successful AEC business leaders to learn how they use people, process, and technology to scale their businesses.
So sit back and get ready to learn from the industry's best. This is Building Scale.
Hey listeners, it's Will here. Our mission is to help the AEC industry protect itself by making technology easy. If you've ever listened to our show, then you know that the three pillars of scaling a business are people, process, and technology. So if you suspect technology is your weak link, then book a call with us to see where we can help maximize your company's IT and cybersecurity strategy. Just go to buildingscale.net/help.
Today's guest is Mike Kaeding. Mike is the CEO of Norhart. Norhart designs, builds, and rents apartments. They are transforming the way apartments are built and managed by incorporating technologies and efficiencies that have revolutionized other industries and led to high-quality, cost-effective projects. Norhart's mission is to solve America's housing shortage by transforming the way apartments are built and managed. And in doing so, they will improve the way we all live. Mike has even said that the goal is to cut cost of housing by 50% in these cases. And Norhart has won some pretty prestigious awards, including Customer Success Team of the Year Gold winner, a Silver Stevie Award, and the Star Tribune has named them a top 40 place to work in their top 200. And with all that said, Mike, we're really excited to have you on the show. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
When I first spoke to you, I was like, this man's a genius. I went back and forth. I remember going to Will and saying, like, he's unbelievable. He's unfathomably great. And then we had the planning call, and Will had very similar thoughts afterwards. And I was like, yeah, it wasn't just me. I wasn't just wowed by the Mike factor. So we're super, super excited to have you on. So I said a lot of nice stuff, but tell us your origin story. Tell us how you got into construction, how you got this vision, and tell us about Norhart.
Yeah. So at a very high level, what we're working to do is we just produce and build apartment buildings, but we're really focused on driving down the cost of construction. We've been achieving about a 20 to 30% reduction in those costs, and our dream is to achieve a 50% reduction. But imagine what that means. It means someday your rent or your mortgage payment could be half. That's our dream. We want to work to solve America's housing affordability crisis. You know, I grew up with this. My parents originally started our business. In fact, as I was growing up, we lost everything. My dad was actually kidnapped in Peru, and we eventually worked back up past all of that. And I remember being on site, sweeping floors, swinging the hammer. Like, I think it was pretty much worthless at that time, but my parents are giving me a chance to understand the world of construction. Grew up with it, was leading teams by high school. And by the time I went off to college, there was one thing that I knew. I didn't want anything to do with the family business. And see, the reason that is that I didn't want people to think it was given to me. So after college was up, my dad wanted me to join the business, and I really started wrestling with my own ego. Because what I realized deep down is that I wanted to make some kind of meaningful, positive impact in the world. And if I really wanted to have that impact, why not start from this foundation? It was very small business at the time, but this small business, and take it and scale it up to a point of having that kind of worldwide impact. So I swallowed my pride, got over my own ego, jumped into the business, and my dad and I doubled the size of the company in the first few years. And then one day, my dad unexpectedly passed away, which is horrible. The whole story there. And overnight, I became CEO of the organization. I didn't take the title for like 5 years, but I was running the company. And it was a real big challenge. And there's stories I can go in there as well. But that was sort of the start. That's how everything started to kick off to where we're headed today.
So that's one, there's tons of story there. Obviously, the Peru situation, father dying. We talk about transition, succession planning. That seems like more out of, hey, one day now you're head of everything. That's got to be taxing as personal, right? Obviously, a personal tax on you, but then also the people are dependent on you for the business. What did that look like? Right after that, you obviously were running the business at that point, and you were left to your own devices, if you will.
Yeah, during that time, we were. It was my first project all on my own without my dad. It was called Emberwood. And I struggled to get approval through the city. In fact, there were some life lessons I learned through that about building the relationships rather than just trying to force something through, because I thought I just had the right to build, again, kind of working through my own ego. But when we got on site to start doing the work, the city was really unsure of us, and particularly they're unsure of me. In fact, they shut us down twice. And the second time they shut us down, they pulled me into the city offices, and I will never forget this. They sat me down at their table with all these big wig city officials that already didn't really like me. And they said, Mike, they didn't say it quite like this, but this is essentially what they said. They said, Mike, you're just some pipsqueak kid. Like, there's no way you can do this. We don't have faith you can do this. You need to hire someone else to manage this site. Basically saying I wasn't good enough. And they weren't going to let us start working until I found someone to fill that role. It's the worst way to go find someone of high caliber to work with you. We found someone in just 3 days. Again, not good. It ended up not being a great fit, but he was enough of a front man that we could do our work behind the scenes, get our stuff figured out, and deliver what the city needed. I remember just a few months before we were supposed to open, we had a water main pressure test. This is a test to see if there is some leak in this giant water pipe. It was over 1,000 feet long, buried 15 feet in the ground, and the test came back as failed. There was a pinhole leak somewhere in this massive water main. We had to go find it. My excavator wanted nothing more than to leave our site, and I just stood out there day after day, was in the mud in my nice clothes from sunrise to sunset every single day with the excavator, who wanted nothing more than to leave, trying to find this pinhole water leak. After a couple of weeks, we finally found it. But then I remember a few days before we were supposed to open, one of the city officials came out and looked at our site and said, there's no way you're not going to open this building in the next few days. And here I have a couple dozen families that were about to move in. Where were they going to go unless I made this work? We worked through the night for multiple days. And I remember the last day, about a half a dozen inspectors for a half-day inspection looked at every nook and cranny of that building. At the very end, the head building official pulled me aside in the underground parking garage. I'll never forget this. He said, Mike, I know we were hard on you, but honestly, this is the nicest project we've opened in this city. It's like, finally, right? Years of feeling like I'm not good enough, years of struggling to figure out the right way forward, years of just being beat down constantly. And finally, I had a moment of reprieve where someone looked at me and said, maybe you can do this. And that was really a powerful moment for me.
That's, yeah, I could see how the reprieve there, just refreshing to hear the hard work has come to a positive resolution, obviously.
Yeah.
Did your confidence start building from there, or was it building before then?
There's been stages where it keeps building, but I will say that if you're scaling, so we've scaled up. We're about a $250 million company today. We've been doubling in size almost every year, not every year. But with that kind of growth, there are things that hit you literally all the time that just could be a knockout blow, constantly whacking you in the face. And every single time that happens, like you've got to learn a whole new set of skills, a whole new capability, and you feel completely inadequate in that capability. So now, yeah, when I look back, building a 100-unit apartment building, it's easy. I can do it, right? It seems easy today. Today, there's new challenges that I face that feel hard, but I'm sure in 5 or 10 years, I'll look back and say they're easy. So at every step of the way, I'm reminded of how little I really know and how hard I have to work to grow the skill set I need for the next level of growth.
The growth, amazing. So, close to every year doubling up. That's awesome. That also comes not just with revenue, but that also comes with people. So we'd love to talk to you about hiring practices. How do you find good people? How do you vision that? What does that look like? Obviously, doubling up that frequently, you've got to hire people. So what does that look like?
Yeah. The number one lesson that I've ever learned in business is to hire the best people. And when I say that, I truly mean the best. We will fly people in from other states to come work during the week and fly them home on the weekend. In fact, one of our team members in 2007, Steve Jobs announces the brand new iPhone. Steve Jobs walks off that stage, and our team member walks on that same stage following Steve Jobs' announcement. It's that caliber of people. And see, what I often get feedback here from other business leaders is, Mike, that sounds expensive. And yes, if you look at it on a cost per person basis, it is expensive. But what most leaders fail to understand is that the best people outperform the average by 2 to 5 to 10 times as much. And so instead, if you look at it on a cost per unit produced, the best people are actually your least expensive. So for those afraid they can't hire the best, my response is you can't afford not to. So that's the groundwork. That's what we need to have in our organization to have great success, especially in our world where we're trying to change construction. But that isn't enough to get great people, right? There's so much more that goes into it. And I'll touch on one piece of that. And then it's hiring. In the world of construction, it's very hard to find great construction workers. In fact, before I really understood these principles, we had like an acceptance rate like 50%, right? It was like, if you breathe, great, come in and start working with us to get jobs done.
Me or Will would get a job, one of us.
Yes, exactly. Today, our acceptance rate is 0.4%. It's 10 times harder to get into our company right now than it is Harvard. But how in the world do you find people of that caliber and still get the volume of people that you need? You can't just say no to everyone. Well, the one insight that we had was the best people are not looking for jobs. You have to go find them. And so if we really wanted to be serious about finding the best people, we needed to build out an entire recruiting capacity in our team. This is one of those things that hit me across the face, right? We ended up hiring about a dozen or so recruiters at the time that we were only about a 100-person company. Then we used that recruiting team to kind of map out the entire universe of staff in our area of the country. We got some tools and software and stuff to start mapping them out so that we could start identifying the best people, start proactively reaching out and building relationships with those people in advance so that we could pull them into our company when we needed them. That whole immense amount of effort to build up that recruiting capacity has allowed us now to fill positions with high caliber people in a way that many other companies really struggle with.
that math seems to be very, very off the wall. You're 100 people, and the next 12 all recruiters seems maybe not the best word. Seems crazy. That seems like insane. How does that work?
All of a sudden, 10% of your company are recruiters. I would say any company outside of an actual recruiter would say that that's a little nutty.
It's insane. What we did is we looked at the problem we wanted to solve and we backed out of it. And then we said, okay, given that number of recruiters, is it actually less expensive for us to find the best people than to try to struggle with a smaller recruiting team and then not having the best people? And we found that it was. But there are other things that you can actually do to reduce the cost involved, right? Because we're all about reducing costs. So all except one of our recruiters are actually international employees. And when you hire international, the cost per person, you get a higher quality. Especially at the time we were hiring, it was virtually impossible to hire good recruiters because everyone was really struggling with the same problem. We went international. We found amazing people at a much, much lower cost point. This allowed us not to have a huge overhead, but also get the results that we needed to have. Now, the next thing you have in the back of your head is, how in the world could you use an international team to actually recruit people into your organization? Well, that was the next thing that hit us across the head. How do we solve that? We ended up building, it was like a 2 to 3 month training process where we went all the way down to the point of like, here's an electrical outlet in the United States. This is what it looks like. This is how you, like, here are American sports going on right now. Here's how you follow what American sports are going on so you can have more authentic communication. Here's geography. Here's all these different locations, right? So that the recruiters themselves felt native, even though they very much were not. So there's so much that went into that to make that effective.
So essentially, thinking out of the box, thinking out of the country in this case, but then solving those problems. So exactly. And as we spoke, this seems to be the repetitive action of like, what's the goal we want? Let's use any possible solution. Let's then attack that solution and then work through the small problems that solution comes to hand. Like,
exactly.
Is that the methodology?
Try, fail, try, fail, try, fail. But you want to do that as fast as possible. And people are often nervous about that, right? Like, I'm going to try something new. I want to make sure it's right. I want to make sure it's in a good spot. What we've learned is it's way better to get in, scrape your knees, screw it up a few times, and learn and iterate, but to do that as quickly as possible. And many things that we try are actually complete failures, right? There's so many things that we fail through that we don't do anymore because they just didn't work out. But we don't really know that until after we've tried.
So I got a question a little bit about culture here. With that much failure going on, now this might be normal in the world of entrepreneurship, but for normal people that are, we'll say, quote unquote, 9 to 5, that amount of failure usually leads to some version of depression or a self-assessment of I'm not good enough. Would that be true to say? Did you encounter that?
Oh yeah. I think the key thing is going back and hiring the right people, right? So for us, we understand what our values are. We actually fight to hire people that align with those values. And it's things like achieve great things. And we talk about, one of my favorite quotes is, we choose to go to the moon, not because it is easy, but because it is hard, right? Why did we go to the moon? Yeah, there was a space race going on. But the fundamental reason we went to the moon is because it's freaking awesome to say we went to the moon. Right. And so if you find people with that spirit and energy, a lot of the people here don't have that same, there's like a gene in them. There's something wrong with them, but they don't feel the same dread and pain through that failure. Now, with that said, it still is there to a degree. And so it's not perfect. I think it's a balancing act. There's a part of it, which is just a constant reminding from a leadership's perspective of, hey guys, we failed in this area. It's okay. We learned. Awesome. Let's celebrate it. Right. And then I think there is an element of understanding who individual people are in your organization, and then trying to adjust your management style or a little bit of the environment around that person to match their strengths. And so you want to understand their genius, put them in that role that is that genius. And then if they struggle with this like failure, chaos sort of thing, you can actually adjust that role a little bit to give them more of a sense of normalcy. So maybe they're just a graphic designer, for example, and now we're going to provide a certain number of designs they have to come on a regular basis. They don't need to have all the exposures of the ups and downs of the rest of the world. They're just kind of given a little bit, this carve out of this kind of more comfortable environment.
So hiring is difficult, even with many recruiters, I'm sure. When somebody gets in, what does that look like in regards to how do you know that like we definitely made the right choice? This is definitely the right person, because, interviewing is one component, and obviously you can look at experience and like there's ways to have indicators, but you don't know until they're in it. What does that look like?
Yeah. Interviewing someone is the second worst way to find the best candidates. Everything else is tied with last. Sorry. Yeah, it's the reality is it's very, very hard. Even the best people I know at hiring say at the end of the day, they're only scoring about 50%. So first off, the interview process is fairly extensive. There's multiple rounds of interviews, but once you make it through, you're still not hired on. Even though you're coming to work, you're getting a paycheck. For most positions, not all, but most, there's a 2-week trial period. And at the end of that 2 weeks, it's not the managers, it's not leadership, it's your coworkers will come together and decide whether or not you're strong enough, you're good enough, quality enough to be on their team. And those team members, they don't settle, right? If you're anything short of amazing, they don't want to work with you, and they say no. And it's something like 60 or 70% of people don't make it past the trial period, which is crazy to me. But then, even with all of that in place, just because you made it through all of that doesn't mean you're the right person. Either we made a mistake or things could change, and maybe your life circumstances change and you're deciding to be a different person or something that it just isn't quite a good fit anymore. So then we have something called the keeper test. We stole this from Netflix, but I like it. The idea is this: if a particular employee were to quit, how hard would you fight to change their mind? If you would fight tooth and nail to keep that employee, great, they're the right fit. If it's anything shy of that, then they're not the right fit. Or put another way, if your employee would apply for the job today, would you hire them? If you wouldn't, why are they still there? And usually the reason they're still there is selfish, right? It is painful. It's hard to let them go. And then you've got this vacancy that you've now got to fill. But the thing is, I have seen what great teams look like. And once you get the point to see what incredible teams look like and how they work together, I don't want to settle for anything less than that. So I push our team's leaders all the time that we're fighting to do that. Now, if they fail the keeper test, we work hard to support them on the way out. Great severance. We usually give them a fair amount of time to find a job, and we'll help them find that job. In some cases, employees actually have come back to us and thank us for firing them because they weren't in quite the right role. That wasn't aligned with their genius, and they didn't love their job either. They just needed a little bit of a push to get to a point that they could find a job that they loved. But the other thing that it is a bit of a challenge because there's a degree of fear, right? Am I going to be let go? Am I good enough? And so one of the things we coach people on quite a bit is go ask your manager. Ask them, if I were to quit tomorrow, how hard or would you fight to keep me, basically? And if the answer is anything shy of I would fight super hard to keep you, then the follow-up question is, what can I do as an employee to solve those issues? And what's amazing is the people that ask that question, first off, they're symbolizing right away that they probably are the right fit because they want to work to improve and grow. But they're also now coming at it with the mindset of, I am open to change. I'm open to feedback, which is actually, frankly, one of the hardest parts of getting someone to change, is that they're authentically open to those changes. So what's great about that is it moves the power back to the employee, who ultimately is the decider of their fate, because they get to choose to take these actions to improve their situation or not.
So I love the insight, love the psychology behind this. I love the Netflix manifesto. We use it in our hiring process as well. So
Yes.
I'm a huge fan. We incorporate some parts of it as well. And so one thing I want to understand is, you've gone through all of this, but we're all human, meaning to err is to human, I think is, at least that's the modern version of that quote. And so how do you make sure that there's consistency, or do you actually want consistency out of humans, or do you deal with them a little bit differently?
So if we're thinking about like consistency in the work output, is that sort of the question?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
This is something that we've struggled a little bit with, in that I tend to be of the mindset of hire great people and get out of their way. And that is great. And that is very much where we are on the spectrum. But then that produces situations where one person's best effort and what they think is right is a little bit different than somebody else. And so you create a little bit of inconsistency. You've got to work through these issues. One of the ways that we're working to solve that is using better tools. And so one example, we use a lot of lean manufacturing processes. In fact, we have a partnership with Toyota, which helps us bring some of the innovation that Toyota and manufacturing has brought to the world of manufacturing, and to bring that into construction. One of the things that they do is they've got a different term for this, but it's sort of a standard operating procedure. It's a little booklet, maybe not even a booklet, a couple pages with pictures of each step of this process. So if you're building a wall, it's the wall together, nail the bottom plates, put the sheeting on, right? That sort of thing.
You mean like the IKEA pictures, the IKEA pamphlet pictures?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those. Now, where I think the average company kind of lands is they say, all right, this is the standard, follow the standard, stop giving me any feedback on it. Just do this. If you don't do this, I'm mad at you. That doesn't work for our culture. Instead, what we see this is a tool to bring people together to come to agreement on how we're going to do the work, but we can all say the work is wrong and we can make changes to that work. In fact, it's the people on the front lines that are the best to know that it should change. And so it's not a dictatorial, this is how it has to be done kind of rule. It becomes more of a communication device to get us all on the same page.
How much time goes to essentially thinking about how to improve a process, right? And I know certain companies do, there's a percentage, maybe some for you, maybe there's not a percentage, it's just a kind of a feel. What does that look like? Because obviously Toyota Kata, lean construction, effectively, you have to think about the processes separate from actually doing the processes, like, the amount of work that goes there. So what does that look like?
Yeah, there's a couple things with that. I would say at Toyota, this is before I really learned how important this is, but one of the executives pulled me aside one day, said, Mike, you're screwing this up. I'm like, not again, right?
Oh, man.
What a life again in the face, right? It was a really high level executive from Toyota. So, Mike, what you're failing to understand here is that at Toyota, we have about 12% of our staff is just focused on supporting people doing the work. And a huge part of that is improving the processes for that. Like, you don't have that at all here. You're just running around with your head cut off trying to sell more fires. And this is something you don't really get out of the books, in my opinion, when you're reading about lean. Said, honestly, from our experience, the most important position in the organization is the team lead. It's the person right above the people on the line. The team lead has 4 major functions. So I'll kind of explain 2 of them. The first one is if there's ever a point at which someone's pulling the on cord, which is, hey, I've got a problem, the line is about to stop unless we fix this. So they help that person solve those issues. But the other big part of their job is then to work on improving the process. How do we do this differently so that we can actually improve the work that we're doing? That's our big goal, is to get our team leads operating at that level. Right now, if I'm very honest, it's much more the firefighting side of things. Mm-hmm. The other piece that we have, though, is we've got an entire team devoted to helping those team leads gain the skill set, the capability, and also just getting in there and helping them invent and improve the processes that they have. And so that, kind of getting back to your question, that team is 4 people in a 150-person job site, so like 3%. So I'm not up to that 12% yet, but that's where we're at today.
Well, things to strive for. Obviously, you can't do it all. Obviously, cutting costs, lean, this is a piece of that. But what are the other parts? Like, it's a very big aspiration of what you're trying to achieve, right? Which is amazing. Those are the best visions, are the ones that are like, holy crap, a world like that would be unbelievably amazing. So what are other things you're doing to start reducing that cost?
The comment I often get here is, Mike, I see this really cool innovation. It's either 3D printed homes, it's full volumetric modular construction, or it's new robots that's lay blocks and things like this. And they think, oh, this one item is going to just solve construction costs. It's not the case. The actual answer is it's 10,000 little things that have to be addressed in order to drive down those costs. And so really the strategy is, how do you build up the capability within your own organization, all the way down to a front level worker, to be able to improve the systems and fix the 10,000 little issues. From a high level, kind of the basic strategy initially was to recognize that other industries like manufacturing have improved labor productivity by 760% over the past 60 years. Construction's done nothing. It's remained flat at just 10%, right? So if we just take the lessons learned from these other industries and apply it to our own, we should be able to see some meaningful success. One of the first things we did within the world of construction is typically you have a variety of companies that come together to work on one project, and then they go away after that. So you've got a different plumbing company, you have a different electrical company, different HVAC, different general contractor, different manufacturer, different wall panel, right? All these different companies come together. Imagine for a moment if a construction company were to produce a car. You'd have a different company installing the wheel, different company installing the windshield, and a different company installing the door. And of course, the door company, they would call you up and say, hey, I am so sorry. I got delayed on another project and I can't get out there for 2 weeks. Your entire line would be shut down. See, the world of manufacturing looks at us and says, we're crazy. And we respond with, this is the way it's always been done. So we decided to bring all that work under one roof. That saved us money right out of the gate because we don't have to pay subcontractor profits. But now we can start applying techniques that other companies can't. For example, the assembly line. I know, revolutionary. But how in the world could you take a building and drive it down a line? Well, you can't. But what you can do is you can take the person and move them through the building. So right now, about every 5 hours, our teams shift about 1 unit. And so if you look at the end of our building, every 5 hours, we have a brand new apartment unit completed. And just that one technique takes a building that might take 15 months to complete and drives it down to 9.
That's actually super impressive. So you're moving the people in sort of a line fashion through the units, rather than essentially the building materials or the material in front of you and moving that along the assembly line. So the people are the assembly line instead of vice versa. Very interesting.
Yep, that's right.
You also, in our pre-interview process, you also talked about some very interesting things that you figured out in terms of cost cutting, especially for the residents, in these apartments. You went down some very interesting routes that some people wouldn't even necessarily call construction. And we're an IT company. And when I first heard you say the acronym, I had to do a double take and ask whether or not, I hope you know what I'm talking about. I had to ask you twice about the acronym as to whether or not we are actually speaking the same language. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh man, there's so much. You'll have to remind me which things do you want me to discuss?
ISP.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, we're a little nuts, I would say. One of the things that we ended up
in the best way.
Understatement, but go on.
One of the things we did was we started looking at the resident experience. And we started saying, well, how can we improve this experience? One of the negative things that would happen when you moved into a new apartment is you had to sign up for your internet, you had to sign up for your water, sign up for your electrical, your heating, and these would be different companies that would bill you at different times. They had different separate contracts with all of them. And then maybe you don't get your internet for like a week after moving in. Well, why is it that way? Like, it can literally be all ready the moment you walk in that door. You shouldn't have to do any work. And so we started going down that route and realized not only can we go down that route, but we can actually earn money because now we can capture the profits of these other like entities, like internet, for example. So we were a little crazy and we decided to build out our own ISP, so internet service provider. We ended up building out a software development team. I actually have a degree in computer science, so I helped out with part of building that infrastructure out. And now that's what we have. We got routers and switches. We buy dedicated bandwidth and internet into our buildings, kind of tying right into the backbone of the internet. We then distribute that out to all the residents, and residents automatically get logins and passwords to their internet. They have control over their routers. And there's a whole infrastructure that has to be built to make that happen. But once we did, now that experience is better for the residents, we're earning a little bit more money. It's a win-win for everyone.
So, and the way internet service providers make money is they essentially oversubscribe the bandwidth, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially how they make money. So you have a 1 gig internet pipe, you resell that 1 gig internet pipe, 100 times over, because no one uses internet all at the same time, that much at the same time. So, okay, so a little crazy, but understandable. What about, let's say, gas and water? You figured out some things there and made me step back and go, that's interesting. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we did the same thing. So we ended up creating a sub-meter infrastructure. So we actually put meters on every single gas line, electric line, water, both hot and cold water. So we can measure them separately and bill differently depending if you use hot water versus cold water. And then we've got, these devices and throughout our buildings that capture all that data, get fed back to our main systems, which then we can monitor that usage. For example, we can actually know if your toilet flapper is broken because we can see a spike in the cold water usage without a spike in the hot water usage. And then we can proactively address and solve some of those issues so that you're not getting overbilled for your water. We can also provide real-time feedback. This isn't entirely built out. We have the data, but our dream is to have an app where you can actually see like minute by minute, or what your energy or water usage is. So you can be like, dude, Sally, you just went through that shower and you just used $10 in water in that one shower. Like, come on, right? Giving people access to that level of data. But yeah, then it's billed out to all the residents automatically through our systems. And so again, it all just works and is there functioning for you.
I didn't know this, but gas costs. Talk about the costs and then how did you solve that?
Yeah. So one of the interesting things in the world of energy submetering or metering in general is that there's a cost for the basic usage of the BTUs. And then there's a cost that the energy company just applies as a fixed rate on top of each one of your bills. And so you actually pay a little bit more just because they have an individual relationship with you. They've got to manage that. They got to bill you separately. When we master meter something, we still have the per unit BTU or gallon cost of your energy or water. But what we don't have anymore is all of the individual upfront baseline costs. And so because of that, we can actually save everyone more money because now we only have to charge the BTU costs. We don't have to charge all those upfront costs as well that the utility companies typically provide. Now, they don't like this. In fact, one utility company, once they found out I was in some master meter, they actually said, no way, we're not allowing it. I ended up, again, things hitting you across the face. I ended up going to that energy company and kept hearing no. So then I found out that they elect members to be on their board. I found out the process which they got elected. I showed serious interest. I went to all the meetings to getting elected. I started talking with everyone there about getting elected and talking about how I was going to run against them. And once I started getting to that level, then the vice president sat down with me. We had a meeting, discussed the master meters, and then they agreed to let us do that. And I backed off running for the board of directors of the energy company. So that's one way to get what you need to move forward through.
The threat of rival competing board membership. That's part of the secrets.
They have very lucrative, kind of cozy jobs that pay well, and they didn't want to come up with any real threat, I don't think.
No,
and they started seeing me as like a real person, and then I think they also understood the logic, and they were supportive of that eventually as well.
So, not to say that none of these things were not hard to do, but what has been the hardest build out that you've had to do, or hardest new business arm? I don't even know what you would call these resident experience portions of the business.
I think every new problem becomes the hardest, but I think one of maybe the underappreciated things that is really difficult is scaling production. Elon Musk talks about how it's hard to build a car, but it is 10 to 100 to 1,000 times harder to build a system that builds that car. And it's so incredibly true. When we were growing quite rapidly, you would think that doubling your staff means you double production. It's not that way at all. In fact, there's
more people, more problems.
What was that?
More people, more problems.
Yeah. There's this thing called Price's Law that the growth of production is related to the square root of the number of people you hire. So you double your hiring people, and it's like a minuscule improvement in production. And it certainly is that way unless you build out all of the infrastructure to do that. And that is really, really hard. I think maybe more a current issue is interest rates rose, right? Mm-hmm. With rising interest rates means that banks are less willing to lend. In the past, they've typically been willing to lend about 75% of our projects. which is great for us because the cost for us is only about 70 to 80%. In many cases, we would actually get money from the bank to build these buildings, right? Think about that for a moment. Like a bank would pay us, not just to do the building, but give us cash on top of that to build these buildings. It's crazy. It's utterly unheard of in our industry. Now, if there's an industry expert out there, there is more details to that I can get into. But that is, in essence, how it works. Now, with rising interest rates, means that banks now, in the last year, are only providing about 55% of that money. And so now we've had to learn how to raise capital, which is a whole new skill set. You know, for most people in real estate, it's whatever. They're like, yeah, we've done it all the time, not a big issue. For me, it's brand new. And of course, we decided to take a different route than everyone else, which maybe is good, maybe it's not. Most people go down the route of raising money primarily from accredited investors, or actually only from accredited investors. It's much easier to do. You don't need special SEC regulatory approvals. You don't need to be audited. You don't need to go through all these background checks. You don't have to do all these filings. We looked at it and said, well, that's stupid. Why are we eliminating most of America, like 99% of America, from being able to invest in our projects? Like we want to make this available for everyone. Why not? Well, it turns out that's really hard. It took us a year to get just approvals, thousands of pages of legal documents, background checks, audits, the whole 9 yards. We then got full approval to do that. And now it's been about scaling that up. And that has been a new challenge. And it's one we're dealing with right now on a regular basis. In fact, we just 10x'd our Facebook spend on our pipeline now that we're starting to see a good flow through that system. But yeah, so you can earn 10% interest on your money for investing with our companies. We take steps to protect that money. And for a lot of investors, it's been a really interesting and strong offer for them. And it's been fun watching that grow, but I am very much in the middle of it right now, working to raise that capital. So that's the current big challenge.
You actually talked about before talking about loans and interest rates in the pre-interview process, and you decided to try going down a route. Apparently it didn't work. Can you talk about that for a second? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Which route was that?
Something about something, make your own bank, something.
Oh, yeah. So that's essentially what we did here. We're going to look at it and say, hey, the banks aren't offering us as much money as we used to. Like, why not create our own bank, right? So we're offering these. It looks like a bank. It looks like an online bank. You can actually log in. You have an online portal. You can see how much you have invested. The product feels a lot like a CD. You can invest between 6 months and 5 years, and with each term comes a different interest rate. The one big caveat is we're not actually a bank. And at one point, as you just mentioned, we actually looked about going down the route of making our own bank. And we actually talked to the top guy in the world of creating banks in the United States, and it's totally doable. We were really serious about building our own bank. The great thing about that is that investors are FDIC insured. The regulations are thousands of pages long for maintaining a bank. And I actually spent a weekend and just read, more skimmed, but read the whole thing. And it turns out there's some regulation that limits the amount of money that you can put in any one company, which totally makes sense. You want to provide diversification. But because of that limitation, I think we can only put 10% into our own investments. And we just didn't want to create a bank to then invest 90% in other businesses. That felt one step too far. So we decided to back away from that, not do a bank, and instead create an SEC regulated investment. So we're not FDIC insured, but that's why we offer a higher interest rate. And we take a lot of the same steps that banks do, because we did all this research in it, take a lot of the same steps that banks do to protect their investors. So in many ways, we're operated like a bank, but we're not a bank. There is risk.
How do you continuously learn all these things? Because in addition to, hey, we're going to make this construction company the most efficient as possible, which is already such an undertaking. Also, let's open not a bank, but let's open a financial institution of sort. To your point, let's also open an internet service provider. Let's also open, a metered gas and water, portion. It seems like you have many businesses underneath this giant entity, but how do you keep learning how to do these things and doing it at a high level?
Yeah, one of the ways that we look at it before I answer that question is that we will go as deep as we need to solve construction costs, which is why we go into all these crazy things. But it's all in service to driving down those costs and providing awesome homes. Notice we're not creating a toothpick factory, right? Like, we're not doing things that are horizontal, but we are going very, very, very deep, which is how we decide what we're moving forward into. But how do we learn all this stuff? For a big part of it is you can learn a lot simply through hiring the best people. I mean, literally, not only do we have to hire the great people, we actually find world experts in their niche. Like I mentioned, the top guy in the world at creating banks. Revenue management. So the fact that airline prices change on a regular basis, we've implemented that same infrastructure into properties. So your rents, the asking rent, the proposed rent that you see on the website changes on a regular basis. I found the guy who literally invented the industry. I spent a couple of weeks leading up to, I begged him to come out here, got him to agree to come out for 3 days. I prepared by reading every book I could on the topic in the couple of weeks leading up to it. I created my own mathematical models and all this infrastructure side or deep understanding of what we were going to talk about. Then when it came out, some of what I said was right, but there's only half of it. He's like, that was a waste of time. Don't go down that route. But it was amazing. And I recorded the phone calls. We took tremendous notes. And honestly, now, there's probably only 100 people in the world that know as much about revenue management as I do. But it's not because I'm some magical wizard or something. It's because I found the guy who's best in the world and he shared his knowledge with them. We in concrete, the difference between the average expert in concrete versus the world leading expert, like, we found one of the world leading experts and he can create concrete that cleans itself. It's amazing. Some of the UV light hits it and the chemical reaction on the surface of the concrete creates breaks down the soils. And then when rain hits it, actually cleans the surface. He can create.
What are we talking about right now? That's insane.
Yeah. And in engineering, our engineer is probably the top engineer in the world, in my opinion, at the kind of engineering he does. In fact, our engineers go back to the federal government and tell the federal government that they're wrong in their calculations, and they get them to change the codes. It's crazy, the depth. We will do dissertations on a 28-foot long steel joist, and they will figure out the exact width, the depth, how the flange should bend, the thickness of the steel, the size of the holes in the joist. They will maximize that to the T. But again, they can do that when they're at that kind of level. It changes the game. But I think so you get great people like that around you. It's hard not to learn. But another thing is you just got to be super hungry for it. For me, I spend about 15 hours a week just in learning. And how in the world can you do that? That sounds outrageous. Well, you can read or listen to audiobooks. I do a 15-mile run every Sunday. I can listen to audiobooks for my run. I can listen to podcasts to and from work while I'm driving. Right. As I'm eating at night, I often watch documentaries, right? And it's usually on world leading people changing the game. Last night, I saw a Netflix documentary on some of the top soccer coaches in the world. It's just interesting seeing how they have a different perspective of how they manage their teams. There's things that I can learn through that. I join master classes with people that are literally best in the world in their field. One example is public relations. We're on ABC. We were on ABC in Los Angeles last week. We've been on CBS, Wall Street Journal, like all of those things. That just doesn't happen, right? That there's a strategy behind that. And I ended up finding one of the top mastermind groups in the world. And like the people in that group are some like known figures that you see on TV are my peers in that group. And we're learning and coaching and developing each other. But it's putting that energy and time into it. I'll give one last little tidbit, which is that you've got to just be hungry for it. When I was in college, I wanted to see how far I could push myself to learn and grow. So just one quarter, not an entire semester, I took a crazy course load. So at the University of Minnesota, where I was at, the full course load was 16 credits. The maximum course load you could take without special approval was 20 credits. I took 27 credits for one quarter. 27. And I took the hardest classes I could find. And the hardest one was honors abstract algebra. It was a graduate level, honors level math course that doesn't deal in numbers. In fact, it doesn't hardly deal in letters, right? Not variables and stuff like that. It was all entirely in proofs. And the people in that class, no joke, were like Einstein level savant geniuses. It was crazy. I was not. I struggled to keep up, but I enjoy putting myself in those super elite, challenging places because it forces me to learn and grow even more. You can predict a person's success simply by the people that they surround themselves with. So surround yourself with the best world-changing people, and you'll grow and learn as well.
Well, Mike, you have dropped knowledge bomb after knowledge nuke after like you've basically wiped the board here in expectations, and it's been amazing. While I'm sure we could go on and have, a 6-hour episode, I don't think our people, our listeners would necessarily
get tired
want that. Yeah. However, we do have one last question that we like to ask everyone. If you were to go back in time 20 years, what would you tell yourself? What advice would you give?
I get to meet incredible people. Like just last week, I met one of the wealthiest self-made women in America. In fact, she's on the Forbes list. She's one step above Ellen DeGeneres on that list. And just getting to spend time with that caliber of people, there's something that's a bit different between them versus the average person. This is going to sound overly simplistic, but it really is the difference. And that is their mindset. It's an understanding that we are all terrible when we started things, and that we all doubt ourselves. We all think that we're not good enough. We all look around at other people and say, they got things figured out. I don't. There must be something wrong with me. That's how we all naturally think. But the people that change the world are the ones that put that feeling aside and choose to believe that they are capable, that they can do it. And then they put the energy and drive and effort behind making their dream a reality. So I guess looking back at myself, I would say 20 years ago, Mike, it's going to be hard. You're going to feel incompetent. You're going to feel like there's no end in sight. You're going to feel like you can't do it. But don't give up, because you will.
Amazing words of wisdom. Love that.
Yeah, no, that hits home for sure. This was incredible, Mike. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you or Norhart, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, the best way is to visit our website. That's norhart.com, NORHART.com. And two fun things on there. The first we talked about earlier is our new investments, where you can earn up to 10% interest on your money, which is fantastic. And then the second avenue is our shows. In fact, we have one of my favorite shows is Zero to Unicorn. It's about the journey of small business growing to billion-dollar scale. And one of my favorite guests was Michael Oseland, who's the originator and executive producer of Batman. In fact, he was able to just barely eke out the movie rights to Batman when he was pretty young, just after graduating college, got some investors together. But it took him 10 years of people slamming the door in his face, telling him no, telling him there's no way that anyone wants to see a dark and serious Batman movie. But he didn't give up. 10 years. He eventually got that movie made, and now the rest is history with the whole like superhero franchises and stuff happening. He's the one that made that happen. He's had tremendous success in movies since then. But the great lesson from that is just don't give up. You can eventually see your dreams succeed.
Incredible. I will drop all the social links and everything in the show notes. Is there anything else you'd like to tell the people before we say goodbye?
No, keep it up. Work hard and you can do great things as well.
Awesome. Audience, this was incredible. We'll had a blast with Mike. I hope you did as well. Please look them up. Follow Mike, follow Norhart. And until next time, adios.
Adios.
Thanks for listening to Building Scale. To help us reach even more people, please share this episode with a friend, a colleague, or on social media.
Remember, the 3 pillars of scaling a business are people, process, and technology.
And our mission is to help the AEC industry protect itself by making technology easy.
So if you think your company's technology pillar could use some improvement, book a call with us to see how we can help maximize your IT and cybersecurity strategy. Just go to buildingscale.net/help.
And until next time,
Keep building scale.
Scale.